He's got one foot in the frying pan and one in the pressure cooker. Believe me, as a bowler, I know that right about now, your bladder feels like an overstuffed vacuum cleaner bag, and your butt is kind of like an about to explode bratwurst.
Hey, do you mind? I wasn't talking when you were bowling.
Was I talking out loud?
Welcome to Munsons at the Movies. My name is Kyle. I'll once again be your host, joined by the rest of the Munsons. Want to give them a wide berth.
He's what is called a born loser. A real Munson.
And talk a little bit about what's going on in their worlds. This time we'll start with Case.
I've been thinking a lot about holiday films lately, and got me thinking about Ebenezer Scrooge. Does anyone else feel like he was the victim of supernatural bullying? If I went into work and I heard somebody recounting his experience, I'd be like, we need to bring you to the hospital immediately because you are not well. But yet, here we go. I mean, it's like, we're going to use Ebenezer Scrooge. Isn't Scrooge just a code word for somebody that's a shitty person?
Wasn't he a shitty person, though?
He certainly was, but I mean, so do two wrongs make a right? That's my point. Thank you, Aubrey, for bringing it home. Do two wrongs make a right? Because I feel like that's what happened.
I think he fit right in Trump's America. That's what I'd say.
I think when it comes to bullying the ultra rich, we're in good territory. It's fine. He'll be okay.
Yeah, that's all that's going on in my world. Quiet time of year, excited for the holidays. Let's talk some Richard Gere.
I love it. Aubrey.
There's not much going on here either. I watched some dope movies. It's that time of the year where you just catch up, watch as much as you can. And I watched a movie that I think would do very well on this podcast.
Ooh.
Juror Number 2, Clint Eastwood film, Nicholas Hoult.
Oh.
That movie's so good. It's really interesting. I think just as like a crime drama, like thoughtful, what would you do if you were in this situation? I think we'd have a really good conversation about it. I recommend people watch it. This
is a new one.
This is a new one.
Okay.
Just came available, rented it, enjoyed it. Also, I'm a fan of Gladiator 2, so all the haters, you can kick rocks. That movie was a blast. If you're going to fill the Coliseum with water and sharks,
yes,
I'm here for that every single time. Also, the Golden Globes is insane for not nominating Dune 2 more often.
Yeah, 2 nominations for Doom.
Not enough.
1 for every film in the franchise.
Aubrey, when you brought up Juror Number 2, I thought you were talking about the James Marsden project, but I guess different projects altogether.
Too many episodes.
McKay House has had a lot of jury stuff going on, a lot of jury content recently.
Okay.
I got summoned for jury duty, almost got selected, was trying very hard to get out of it. In the midst of being summoned for jury duty, which was weird because it's basketball season, so I kind of was being encouraged to get out of it.
Yeah.
Even though I'm a nerd, so I was like really excited. I was like, I kind of actually want to do this. And then that's when my wife was just peppering me with, you should watch the James Marsden show. You should watch it. It's so good. Mm-hmm. Now you know. And then we watched Juror Number 2. It's just jury content all day over here.
Did you get out by saying you knew Kyle?
Yo, if your name rings bells down here, if your name rings bells down here, that's insane.
Please no. Our dear friend James is going to join us here shortly. He's not quite here. I guess a sick kid is keeping him occupied at this moment in time. But whenever the little one decides to go to bed, he'll jump on with us. What's funny enough, Aubrey, on my side, I was summoned for jury duty as well. I'm right there with you. I want to do it, especially because it's a one-day deal. But I also kind of want a 4-month, 5-month murder trial just so I can not go to work for a while. That sounds pretty good.
Mine was going to be like a week-long murder trial.
I don't want to be involved in either of those.
They told us ahead of time. They're like, murder trial, are you okay with that? And I was like, sure.
Nope. I know my answer would have been, nope. I'm scared by Ebenezer Scrooge. You think I want to be a part of a murder trial? Nope.
But what I am excited for is to invite a new guest into the Munsons universe. We haven't had a new guest in a while. And after our friend Jeff from Australia said, hey, love you all, but life is crazy right now. I can't join again for another episode after doing Edgar Ramirez and the Tooch. We called from the bench, and we called up Edward Chaja. Born in 1992 and was raised Catholic by a single mother in the Bronx. He spent much of his childhood looking after himself while his mother was at work. He first became interested in vampires as a child after seeing Antonio Banderas portray Armand in Interview with the Vampire, The Vampire Chronicles. He worked at Panera up until 2009, when he eventually became Nandor's familiar with the promise of one day becoming a vampire. Welcome to the show, Ed.
Wait, what'd you call me? Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to have you here.
Glad you're here, dude.
Since when did you know that you were inspired by Guillermo de la Cruz?
We have a very similar life story. I wasn't born in 92, or Catholic, or in New York, but we're both gay. We both like vampires, though I gotta say mine was, my inspiration was Bordello of Blood from 1996, Tales from the Crypt movie. Fantastic, that's where I got into vampires. Followed closely by Blade 2 years after the fact.
Hell yeah.
And I never worked for Panera, so we're basically the same person, so it's just kind of like watching myself on screen.
It's like 50, 60%. That's a passing grade in my eyes. Well, I can speak from personal experience. Ed is a movie aficionado, enjoys himself in many good films. We've done Sundance together.
Mm-hmm.
We go to the movies. Our Regal Unlimited passes get unlimited workouts.
For sure.
I love that.
Glad to have you. Glad you jumped on to talk about a little bit of Richard Gere, and let's get into it. All right, birthdays. December 19th. So this episode's dropping a few days before Christmas. Last episode dropped on Thanksgiving, so it doesn't get any more exciting than that. But we got 3 big birthdays today. So first and foremost, we have Alyssa Milano, known for projects like Charmed, Commando, Who's the Boss, Fear, Hall Pass, Double Dragon, Little Italy, and Wet Hot American Summer 10 years later. How old is Alyssa Milano? And may I note, Aubrey, Ed is also a big Charmed fan.
Yes.
We're full of Charmed fans.
Which is the way it should be, respect. When I think about this, because, I think about Charmed often, as one should.
Mm-hmm.
And it's amazing to me that she's as famous as she is for only having been in Charmed.
I was going to say, like, after Charmed, it was just static. I wasn't sure what any of that meant.
Yeah, were you saying was she in other things?
I said Double Dragon, if you remember correctly. Double Dragon.
She was in a vampire movie that was wildly popular, too.
Well, I'm going to approach this with a brand new strategy.
Uh-oh.
I feel like Kyle's tired of my old bit.
Uh-uh.
Now I'm going to change the strategy and play this game straightforward. Alyssa Milano is a stellar 24 years old.
James, you jumped right into the Alyssa Milano guessing game.
Let's go 45.
There's an irony to tonight's episode. I would make an argument that everyone I knew either had a crush on Richard Gere or Alyssa Milano in the mid-90s. So, that being said, I'm going to do some loose math, and I'm going to say she's turning 50.
I don't know. I got to say, she's probably like mid-40s, so like 46-ish.
Well, we have one victor here, and his name is Craig Case, because she's turning 52. You're all very nice people.
Nice. Let's go.
Very good. All right, let's see if we can maintain those niceties with number 2. We got Jake Gyllenhaal, known for Nightcrawler, Donnie Darko, Spider-Man, Brokeback Mountain, Prisoners, Wildlife, Southpaw, Love and Other Drugs, October Sky, Bubble Boy, and Taylor Swift's discography. How old is Jake Gyllenhaal?
You forgot Dalton, the most important of his roles.
I had to squeeze in Bubble Boy, okay? Like, get off my back here.
I'm going to say 40.
I think he's older than that. Maybe 45.
Yeah, kind of the same line. I think he's like 46.
42. We're all peppering the strike zone here.
You guys are pepper, and one of you is a little bit closer than the rest. He's turning 44, so James takes that one.
Ah, nice.
Damn you, James.
All right, last one. Christy Swanson, the original Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, Flowers in the Attic, The Phantom, Dude, Where's My Car, and 8 Heads in a Duffel Bag. How old is Christy Swanson?
No frame of reference here.
I got it mixed up. That's what this was. She's 24.
Wow. Got it.
Timeless.
I'm going to say her and Alyssa Milano are the same age at 52.
Oh, I think Case is right, but I'm going to try to go under him. I'll go 50.
I'm going to go older. I'm going to say she's like 58.
We have one winner again, and Christy Swanson's turning 55, so Case takes it again. Well, happy birthday to them and everybody else who has a birthday on December 19th. All right, we had 5 actors we threw on the wheel for here, episode 111. But we had Liv Schreiber, Naomi Harris, Scarlett Johansson, and Jason Segel. Jason Segel. It's just more fun to say Segel.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't matter because the wheel did not select any of those. The wheel selected Richard Gere, who has 67 credits, 8 producing credits, 10 soundtrack credits, and a pretty incredible dating history that we'll talk about. So we're going to get into the nitty gritty. We're going to talk about the big, the good, the bad, the ugly, and anything else that interested us along the way. But before we do that, we always start with a little actor trivia and to see if James could stump us with some facts, Fast and Furious style.
Gentlemen here are aware, but Ed, I'm not sure if you're aware, but I'm about to read off 3 facts here, 2 of which are going to be true about Richard Gere. One of them is not going to be true about him, but will be true about one of the many illustrious cast members of the Fast and Furious franchise. You guys here have to guess which one that is. Fact number 1 is one of only 2 men to be named People's Magazine's Sexiest Man Alive twice, and is the only person to ever have their spouse included in the award, being named Sexiest Couple Alive. Fact number 2 has an ongoing feud with Sylvester Stallone that spans 4 decades and has resulted in them fistfighting twice. Fact number 3 is banned for life from China due to his political activism and outspoken beliefs. This has resulted in him being banned from the Oscars as well.
I think given Gere's very well-known, not-so-friendly relationship with the Chinese, I think you're trying to trick us there. Because we all know that the only reason Cole Hauser hasn't won an Oscar is because he is banned from the Oscars. And that he has a history of supporting Tibet and anti-Chinese politics. So I think fact 3 has to be the lie, and that's definitely a Cole Hauser fact, the star of Too Fast, Too Furious.
I think the lie is fact 1. People magazine got so caught up in the hype of Fast and Furious that they actually gave it to Brian O'Connor, Paul Walker's character, and Mia O'Connor, Jordana Brewster's character. So Mia and Brian were the sexiest couple alive.
I mean, it's hard to disagree.
See, and I'm of the mind that number 2 is the lie, because a 4-decade feud with Sylvester Stallone, is that what it was? And multiple fistfights?
Correct.
Sounds like Michelle Rodriguez to me. So really reads Michelle Rodriguez. So
Rodriguez will throw with anybody.
right.
Yeah, not bad logic.
The funniest part about that logic is she's probably around 40 years old, so she's been throwing fists since she was 2. Like, just was on a set one day, shot to the nuts, and ever since then has had a vendetta.
Sight, these hands.
This is tough. There's a lot that could be done here.
Uh-huh.
There's been a delay in Fast 10 and the next Fast and Furious. And that's what's leading me to where I'm going.
Ooh.
And in honor of Rhythm and Flow Season 2, which was an absolute disaster, the answer is ludicrous.
Yes. Always is.
For which fact? I want to make sure.
Number 3, the China one. And obviously he's banned from the Oscars because he clearly would have taken one home.
Of course.
Sure.
Actually, I wonder if he was at the Oscars when Crash was nominated. That would be awesome to know.
Luda.
Be like, and here presenting best cinematography is ludicrous.
Luda.
Fact number 1. Richard Gere is one of only 2 men to be named People's Magazine's Sexiest Man Alive, and the only man to have his wife included in the award, being named Sexiest Couple. That's true. We will get into it. This man is one of the greatest lady killers of our time. In 1993, People Magazine named him and his then wife Cindy Crawford Sexiest Couple. He was named People's Sexiest Man Alive again. The only person to get this award twice besides him is Brad Pitt. Almost like every guy that's in the Fast and Furious movies has gotten it once.
Mm-hmm.
You got to step your game up if you want to get it twice. Fact number 2 has an ongoing feud with Sylvester Stallone that spans 4 decades and has resulted in them fistfighting twice. Is true.
What?
I was blown away to learn, because picking a fight with Stallone is not an advantageous decision in my mind, but a man has his limits. I mean, if you had to guess the reason someone would hold a grudge for 4 decades, the amount of reasons is very limited, and you'd probably nail it. It started off as disrespectful behavior, and then it became something that was ongoing and became something that had to do with women.
Yeah.
A pretty famous one. So the initial one was they were on set for The Lords of Flatbush in 1974. Richard Gere's a nobody at this point, and Stallone is like just got onto the scene. Stallone said, he's like, we're doing an improv and we're supposed to, wrestle a little bit. He got a little carried away and we're trying to simulate a fight scene. He took it a step too far. So I told him to kind of lighten up and, stay in character. It's like, but he was impossible to deal with because he was in character. It's like, and so Stallone's on edge. He's like, and then there's another scene where we have to be in a car together. Richard Gere was eating a hot dog and it was covered in mustard and he dripped it on me and I know it was intentional and I elbowed him in the head and we started fighting. That is so specific that I don't doubt for a second that isn't how he perceived what happened. I don't know if that's what happened, but I've seen that fight between two men happen before where it's like, I feel like you crossed that line on purpose and we have to fight. The director at the time made the decision, you know what? Gere's not going to be in this movie anymore. And so he was replaced and he was not in that movie.
Wow.
Fast forward, now they're both superstars and they are invited to then recently single Princess Diana's dinner honoring her, hosted by Elton John. And Elton John wrote in his biography, Richard Gere and Princess Diana are flirting. They're looking like they're kind of vibing. We get ready to have dinner. He's like, and all of a sudden, I don't know where Richard Gere and Sylvester Stallone are. He goes, and I go and I look for them, and they are wrestling in my hallway. He's like, I had to separate them. And Stallone was furious. And they're just cursing at each other. Stallone was like, I didn't know you'd invite Prince fucking Charming here. And apparently they were both like trying to flirt with Princess Diana, and things had boiled up over time, and they were finally like, do you want to go? And they fought again for the second time. Stallone has denied this fact, but the rumor that became public where it was posted in magazines where Richard Gere had some sort of sexual relationship with a gerbil or a hamster. Gere has said he thinks Stallone is the one who started that rumor.
Oh.
And Stallone has said, I don't know what he's talking about. I'd never do that. And Gere's like, fuck that guy. He's like, I don't want to fucking talk to him.
That might be my favorite fact of all time. That's hilarious. And Elton John trying to break up that fight makes it even better.
It makes so much sense, James. It's like the athletic brute guy competing for women against the Rico Suave, not very.
Yeah.
I mean, he was a gymnast, so maybe like Stallone knew he was a gymnast, and so they both felt threatened by each other, peacocking for women. So none of that shocks me.
I have to circle back to this. Did you say they started fighting over them flirting over Princess Diana?
That is correct, bro.
Or did.
Because my mind is just vividly seeing Sylvester Stallone trying to talk to Princess Diana. And those two together is where my imagination is at. That to me is fascinating.
Hey, yo, Princess.
It's better than both of them. Like there's no competition here. Like she is out of their leagues by miles.
I think she just probably liked the attention. She was trying to date like the richest men on earth at that time, and they were a couple decimals away from meeting that criteria.
Well, maybe you guys forget Richard Gere was voted sexiest man alive twice.
That's a fair point.
How many times was Stallone voted that?
0.
Not more than once.
But I know he's got a lot of Razzies. Does Gere have those? Nope.
And final fact number 3 is banned for life from entering China due to his political activism and outspoken beliefs as well. This has actually led to him being banned from the Oscars. There's one Fast and Furious actor who almost got banned from China, and that's John Cena. And that is simply because he said Taiwan's going to be the first country in Asia to be able to watch Fast 9. And China's like, hold on there, chief. Taiwan's not a country. And he apologized. Yeah, he apologized 10 times over. All these facts are true, and they're all about Richard Gere. He's a very fascinating man. Richard Gere in the 1993 Academy Awards was presenting the Oscar for art direction, and rather sticking to the teleprompter, he seized the spotlight and just condemned the Chinese government, looked right in the camera. And he's a Buddhist for over a decade at that point, and he spent a minute focusing on human rights violations the Chinese government was committing all over the world, but especially in Tibet. Immediately banned for life from China, was not invited back to the Academy Awards for over 20 years, and has said that he thinks that this comment has derailed his career. I'll give Gere credit. He is not back down. He's started foundations to be pro-Tibet. He's boycotted China at every passing. He still says it with his chest pretty proudly, but it did derail his career for sure.
All right, James. Good job. Appreciate you bringing the trivia facts back to us again.
Mhm.
All right, Case, what do we got for a snapshot in box office?
Being in big box office movies is not one of his strengths. His $24.7 million average for film budget ranks him 97th out of all of our actors. Runaway Bride is his largest reported budget at $70 million. Even Dennis Quaid in our last episode has had a few $100 million or more budgeted movies. Richard Gere has none on our list. One of his most notable box office bombs was the fascinating movie The Cotton Club, which while I was preparing for this episode, I have become fascinated with that movie and the story behind it. It is a wild, wild story. And you guys know I love the behind the scenes stuff.
Can confirm you mentioned it 3 times in our text channel over the past 3 weeks.
From a return on investment standpoint, the biggest bomb in his career is The Flock, which grossed $7.2 million against a $35 million budget. However, when it comes to return on investment, Gere has 2 of the best movies we've looked at. An Officer and Gentleman world grossed $130 million against a $7.5 million budget. But the real crown jewel in his box office snapshot is Pretty Woman, which world grossed an impressive $463 million against a $14 million budget. That's the 6th best return on investment that we have in our rankings. And only 2 in the top 10 have more than a $10 million budget. The other most recent impact to his box office numbers is his Star Meter ranking, which got a huge spike because of his current appearance in the TV show The Agency on Showtime or Paramount Plus. But here are the numbers comparatively for Mr. Gere. 59th total box office at $2.8 billion, 28th in Star Meter at 541, 73rd in Critic ranking at 52.5%. This one was wildly low for me. 105 in fan ranking at 52%. 32nd and 6th in 2 different box office metrics with an overall ranking of 40 out of 111. Thoughts?
Better than I thought it would be given how low his critic and audience scores were.
Yeah.
I was prepared to drop another point when you said that, but 40's not bad.
Yeah, that's pretty high.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm surprised by that.
I think it tracks. I think we're talking about someone who shot to superstardom and was in like every major romantic movie plus box office dramas and thrillers, and then like wasn't for a long time. And so in my mind, that sounds like someone who, if they continued the path that they started on, you'd be talking about those numbers in single digits in my mind.
I think that's interesting because I've always thought about Richard Gere as like a romantic comedy guy and a romance guy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And like there just wasn't any room for that as he got older.
I mean, his filmography in the 90s, every one of them is a major Hollywood film that it's fascinating. The biggest thing that I was shocked by was how small his average film budgets were. Runaway Bride is his largest budgeted film. That was shocking to me.
That kind of tracks and makes sense with the kind of films that he's been doing, right? He's kind of low to the ground. You can see yourself or see aspects that you want in yourself in how he acts. So his budget in his movies aren't like huge because he's just playing hot guy down the street, right? That you fall in love with, or kind of rich guy down the street, or this everyman persona. And that's kind of what his entire niche was built off of. So I think it makes sense that he doesn't have like these huge box office movies behind him.
I mostly relate to the hot guy down the street.
I really connected with his characters in a lot of films.
But also like his ultra fame. What huge budgeted movies would he have been in when he was at the peak of his fame? The time that he would cash in on that would have been when he was older, and it would have been more nostalgic to see him.
Yeah.
Like when Michael Douglas pops up in Ant-Man and you're just like, oh, that's cool that he's there.
Mm-hmm.
Like when he was at the peak of his fame, what movies was he going to do like that?
Yeah.
I feel like he almost just kind of missed the boat.
Mm-hmm.
He found a niche, just not a huge budget niche.
Yeah.
I mean, he could definitely still show up as a government worker in a Marvel movie in the next 4 years.
Not if they want to go to China.
Yeah, and Marvel's huge there. So I think that's a huge portion of it.
I forgot about that. That's a great point. I forgot about that. Definitely won't be any Transformers movies.
It'll be interesting to talk about as we go through. I think he may be erroneously characterized as a rom-com actor. I don't think the majority of his films are rom-coms.
We'll talk about them.
I think Pretty Woman was so massive that it, like, everybody just went, yeah.
That's what we're here to break down for the audience.
I love it.
We're doing science here. We're going to take the hypothesis of Richard Gere as a rom-com actor and dig into it. And remind me again, what was his IMDb star rating number?
His star meter is 28th.
Cool. Let's ride that momentum. All right, so early days, before we get into first major role, which we're saying is 77, everything before that. He's a Philly guy, born in Philly, 1949. Growing up, he was super active in gymnastics, played the trumpet in high school, a little bit of an athlete, a little bit of a musician growing up early on. He went to UMass Amherst, studied philosophy on a gymnastics scholarship. I mean, the first actor we've covered in 111 that had, Case, have we covered anybody else that has an extensive gymnastics background? I don't think so.
I don't think so.
I think it's the first one in 111 episodes.
Yeah, I don't think so.
And being a guy in the 70s in gymnastics, I'm sure that was a challenge. I would imagine you would get bullied a little bit by your male peers at that moment in time.
That's why he fought Stallone.
Yeah.
There you go.
I think you get bullied a little bit, but if you're getting a gymnastics scholarship, that means you're like absolutely yoked.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You can get bullied to a point, but you're like picking a fight with a Jack Russell Terrier. Like, he's a little guy who's jacked. Like, I don't know if you want to do it.
He left his scholarship 2 years in to start his work in acting. So he gave up on the gymnastics, and his first acting role was in a production of Rosencratz and Guildenstern Are Dead in Cape Cod in 1969. And his first major acting role was on Broadway in a rock opera called Soon in 1971. So he's got the theater background as he started to devote himself to the craft early on. 71 to 78, he was on and off with actress Penelope Milford. It's over a 7-year period. Right smack in the middle of that was his fistfight with Stallone on The Lords of Flatbush, which, hey, could have been a movie we would have talked about, but it's always more fun to talk about the fights off the screen, honestly.
That was way more fun.
But otherwise, like during this time, he's getting small roles. Report to the Commissioner, he played Billy, 75. He was in an episode of Kojak. There's a couple other small roles in there too. Not atypical of most actors who are starting on the stage and then move into the screen. You do what you can. Your agent gets you the jobs. Do a little bit of TV, do a couple TV movies, right? You kind of get your start and build your profile. So nothing surprising there.
I like to imagine that Telly Savalas pulled a young Richard Gere under his wing and showed him how to be the coolest man alive, because Telly Savalas was the shit. Kojak ruled because of Telly Savalas. I love that guy.
Those are 2 words I've never heard used ever, and I'm glad you're here, Case.
What 2 words?
Telly Savalas? I don't know who that is.
Oh, that's Kojak. I know Kojak.
Telly Savalas, bald dude, always had the sucker, and he'd always say, "Who loves you, baby?" Telly Savalas is the shit.
I believe you.
You could be saying anything to me right now, Case. I have no idea what's going on.
This is good, Case. You represent a different generation.
All famous Mediterranean actors, and Telly Savalas is a proud Greek man.
All right, well, we're going to get to our first major role, which is 1977's Looking for Mr. Goodbar. Excellent title. Played a character named Tony. William Atherton's in this film. And although I haven't seen it, James, I did read on his Wikipedia that he plays a small but not insignificant role in Looking for Mr. Goodbar.
Quick question for you guys. Has anyone here seen this movie?
Nope, but I love the candy bar.
Same.
Okay, that was a test and you guys passed. Because if you said yes, I was going to say, ladies and gentlemen, this is how you test if your friends will tell you the truth. Because it's impossible for you to have seen this movie, and it was impossible for me to have seen this movie. This movie was not released for VHS until 1997, and then it was subsequently pulled off the shelves because they had licensing complications surrounding the film's extensive use of popular music, and so it has only been re-released this past Black Friday. So if you would have said, yeah, I totally seen that, I would have been like, well, you're obviously a liar because you could not have seen that. And so instead, I have watched and reviewed Days of Heaven. And I just wanted to test our friendship. Based on reviews, this Looking for Mr. Goodbar sounds good. I don't know if I'll ever be able to watch it.
It's an excellent title. So, hey, that's good. That's good to know.
Yeah.
Well, Days of Heaven was his next role, so that works out perfect.
Yeah.
I can add, James, that this movie did very well in the box office with a $23 million world gross, despite having illegal music, on only a $2.5 million budget. But I think we all know why that budget's so low now, because they didn't pay for any of their music.
All right, James. So knowing that we just have to speculate about looking for Mr. Goodbar and wishing we could watch it, but it has been buried for many, probably legit reasons. Sounds like you covered Days of Heaven from 1978, a Terrence Malick film. Oh, my man gets to review a Terrence Malick film that's only 90 minutes long. It's bananas.
Days of Heaven came out in 1978. It's got pretty incredible scores on Rotten Tomatoes. It's got a 94% critic score and 89% audience score. And the audience score is with over 10,000 reviews. That's no slouch of an audience score by any stretch of imagination. Richard Gere at this time said that he was fully committed to being a stage actor and obviously incorrectly looked at movies as kind of like bourgeoisie nonsense, right? It's kind of mind-numbing things. And until he had seen Terrence Malick's first movie, which he saw was called Badlands, and he's like, well, that's actually someone who's trying to put art, which he only associated at that moment with the stage, on film. And so he auditioned for the next Terrence Malick film. He's like, listen, I want to be, I love the first one. I want to be in, I want to be in. He's like, and because Terrence Malick is who you expect him to be, it's like the auditions took months. And he said, I got it, then I didn't get it, and then I got it, and he changed his mind, and he did it again. And finally, he was just like, listen, just tell me I don't have it. And if that's the case, I don't care. Maybe the next one. And he's like, no, you're perfect for it. Let's do it. And so they finally did it. And I will say this. All right, so Days of Heaven, 1978. Terrence Malick his direction, in my mind, is obviously not in style, but in the commitment to telling a story his way, is like Tarantino and Spike Lee and more recently Lanthimos, where like no matter what, they're going to tell their story their unique way, for better or worse. I have to respect the commitment because it is a commitment to not sacrifice your style of art, which is hard to do in a profit-driven business, because you know if it isn't for an audience member one time, it's probably never going to be for them. And to still have the balls to continue to do that, and for Terrence Malick to do this is his second movie ever. He's never really changed from this style. And so if you don't like it once, you're not going to like it almost ever. But I will say, if you're not prepared to see a Malick film, in my case, not the guy for me. But if I am prepared to see it, it's a little bit easier for me to digest. His style is real meditative and deliberate. He focuses on mood, atmosphere, and you'll be lucky if he tells you what the plot is. Like you're going to have to figure out what and where this thing is going, but always visually stunning, incredible music, and the cinematography is breathtaking. But the approach might not appeal to everyone, because it's a unique cinematic experience. It's a work of art and not a conventional film. So like in this movie, at its core, Days of Heaven, it's a story about love and consequences and a pursuit of a better life. It's visually, I loved it. He does only natural lighting, and he makes sure to crank the volume up on every part of the human experience. And so the sound is incredible. But it's a poetic style of storytelling, right? And so sometimes that isn't the most easy for me to personally pay attention to. But I will say, of Terrence Malick films, the fact that this was only 90 minutes did help a lot. In this movie, it stars Richard Gere, Brooke Adams, Sam Shepard. It's a tale of survival and love and deception. And it's kind of set against, like, what is this, the 1920s of like rural America. I thought Gere, for his like one first or second role, I thought he was great. I thought it was a really strong performance for someone who's like just kind of still figuring it out. He plays a man who, along with his lover, played by Brooke Adams, kind of works on a farmer, Sam Shepard's land in Texas. And I don't know if the plot really matters that much, because in Malick films, it's leaves a lot up for your interpretation on what he's trying to get across. It's the type of movie where the narrator of this movie is a 12-year-old girl who doesn't really narrate the movie. She's just kind of talking. But I will say, I understand why people loved this movie, because Malick, while he might always be for me, I really did enjoy watching this kind of interesting slice of lifestyle storytelling, because it is just such a beautiful way to watch a movie. And Richard Gere, you see this like handsome, but also kind of conniving, but also kind of vulnerable and confident leading man. And it's interesting because that is where he started in. And it obviously becomes something that he perfects as he gets older.
This is like a really palatable version
Yeah.
of Terrence Malick. And I agree. I think Gere's excellent in his role. He speaks volumes without saying a whole lot at times, because the whole tension of this film is he commits his girl to do a sneak-in plot, and then she falls for Sam Shepard, and now he's got to deal with the fact that, I have to deal with my own error here. All the tension goes through his emotions of the film, which I thought was really interesting. So.
Yeah, it's a film I enjoyed as well. I had a lot of problems with the sound, unfortunately. The service that I was watching it through, I had to crank the volume all the way up and still could barely hear some of the dialogue. So I was really left to my own devices kind of making up what was happening. And I kind of left it with a Little House on the Prairie meets Game of Thrones style story of some kind happening between them all. But to your points, it's a very approachable film. Beautiful in the way that it's done and how it's shot and the lighting that's used, with a story that's narrated, like you said, by that 12-year-old that isn't quite telling you what's going on, but you're hooked into it to figure out what is happening, what is she talking about, where is she headed. It was very interesting, one that I was not expecting what I got out of it, and definitely a highlight.
I think when you talk about meditative patient type films that rely on emotion and interpretation and things like that, these are movies that I really like. So this is right up my alley. This was the first time I watched it. I loved it. I like Terrence Malick for a couple of reasons. I like people that take big swings, even if they don't work. And a lot of times his stuff doesn't work. But I also just am a sucker for really beautiful cinematography. And that's always true with him.
Mm-hmm.
But this is the best version of a meditative, slow-paced film, because it's an identifiable conflict that brings out a lot of emotion when you think about it. So the more you think about it, the more you get out of the film, and Malick leaves room for you to do that. And so when it comes across well, like it does in this, you get a movie that kind of sticks to you for a really long time. In some of his other stuff, maybe not as much, but this is a perfect film to be like, I know that you've been on the internet and you think this guy's insane, but he's also super talented. So watch this.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it showed very early on that Richard Gere can be a male lead in a film.
For sure.
Right out the gate. And what's funny, too, is a lot of these movies we're going to talk about here early in his career in the late 70s and early 80s that made him a name were roles that John Travolta turned down, which I think is fascinating. Shout out to Travolta choosing other projects, I guess.
I'd love to see Travolta in a Malick film. It would be hilarious.
Now, especially. Now.
Unintentionally so.
Love it. Good start there. All right, so some personal life stuff in there, too. So he dated a painter by the name of Sylvia Martins from 78 to 86. This is, I believe, when he started his Zen Buddhism journey. I think, James, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like she was already into that world when they started dating, or do you know if they got into it together? Everything I read is that it was a part of their relationship during that time.
Honestly, I'm unsure, but that tracks based on the timeline of when he started being very outspoken about his beliefs.
But what's wild, too, he dated this woman allegedly for 8+ years, but there's all these rumors about other women that he was linked to during that time, including Barbra Streisand, amongst many others.
In 2 separate autobiographies
Mm-hmm.
by the famous husbands of celebrities, they mentioned their wives cheating on them with Richard Gere. 2 different men.
Priscilla Presley and Kim Basinger. Yeah.
My famous wife kind of threw our marriage away by sleeping with Richard Gere. That happens in 2 different books.
79, still doing Broadway work. I thought it was pretty cool. He was in a production of Bent, and he played a gay Holocaust victim, and he was one of the first in Hollywood to play a character like that. And the more I researched and learned about Gere, not just his politics, he was never afraid to play characters that were considered unconventional or career killers to folks in Hollywood. And we'll get into that in my review of And the Band Played On here in a little bit. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, and kind of around this, and I don't know if it's stemming from it, but there were a lot of rumors about Richard Gere being gay, even though he had all of this infidelity, people cheating, people's wives cheating. There were long, persistent rumors that Richard Gere was gay.
Yeah.
And one of the things that he did early on is he never refuted it. He never announced his sexuality. He refused to actually give in to that level of speculation, and instead just focus on his craft, which is really interesting to see play out 70s, 80s, 90s, where stars still struggle with that.
Yep. Well, 1980, he plays the character Julian in American Gigolo, a Paul Schrader film where he plays a male escort who runs into some of the wrong crowds. But damn, he looks good, and does he dress well? The American Gigolo Julian aesthetic is a thing.
He just got such an impressive hairline, and it looks like it's painted on. And I'm jealous of men like this. Must be an awesome life to just wake up every morning and look like you got like the Lego Man hair on your head, like it's just plopped right on there.
Oh yeah, they were showing him off. A movie that does not age very well. Almost immediately, it doesn't age very well.
Oh, shocker!
It was a rude awakening, like 5 minutes into that film. Haven't heard that many uses of the F slur since, I don't know, high school maybe, or middle school.
Yeah, real long time ago.
Yeah.
He's got a couple of roles or scenes in movies that don't hold up.
Yeah, and I mean, his character is definitely implicated in some of it in this, but again, I think from a pure role standpoint, though, pretty impressive early role there in his career. I mean, the film, it's a Paul Schrader films, and Paul Schrader films always have a particular, like, style to it. Think of, like, what that dude posts on Facebook periodically, but he's a lead. Already by this point in his career, he's leading major films like this.
This hit really high with critics at 74 versus 50. Why do you think critics cling to this one so well?
Well, I think people like Paul Schrader. That's where it starts. So they like Paul Schrader and they like his films.
Okay.
And he very charismatic in this role. Like, whether or not you like the story, Gere is still pretty darn good at kind of playing this male escort character who's caught up in this web of terrible people.
Okay.
That's my take on it.
I haven't seen this movie, but that's the answer as to why critics liked it. Schrader can write.
Okay.
Now, in An Officer and Gentleman, 1982, a role that got his first Golden Globe nom alongside Deborah Winger. My favorite part about this film when we covered it for the Deborah Winger episode is when it became very clear that Deborah Winger was not a fan of Richard Gere in this movie. And James, didn't she say it was like acting next to like a plank, like a board? It was like acting with a plank or something like that.
At this point, he is the romantic lead. And because this movie had done so well and they on film had chemistry, people were expecting her. It's the press tour, right? It's, hey, so what was it like working with Richard Gere? And without skipping a beat, she used every opportunity to fucking dog him out and be like, it was like kissing a brick wall. It's like act like no emotion behind anything. And everyone's like, whoa, for real? He's like, all she did was talk negative about him. Mm-hmm. To his credit, he didn't really go out of his way to say anything bad about her. He just acknowledged that they're probably not going to work together ever again. Like, he was very politically correct about it, but Winger spared no expense in airing him out.
Well, you got to remember, too, it was nominated for 5 Oscars. It won 2 of them. Louis Gossett Jr. won 1.
Yeah.
He was nominated. He was not, right? And so that probably created.
She brought that up after the fact. She's like, look at all the awards it was nominated for. He didn't get nominated. I'm like, damn, she's still going after his ass.
Ruthless, bro.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't go as hard as she went, but I kind of side with her on this one. He wasn't the takeaway from this for me. I think he's
a one trick.
Yeah.
He's one trick in this.
He gets outpaced.
Mm-hmm.
I think she is phenomenal. So I think that's part of the issue.
Yeah. She's great in this, and Lou Gossett Jr. is also great in this.
I'm just interested in y'all's take on this. Like, for me, Richard Gere as an actor, in and of himself, just in isolation, I don't think is really pushing any envelopes with his acting, with his craft, but he allows other characters to flourish on screen beside him in really tremendous ways. And it's like Sandra Bullock has like her stardom there, and some of the other actors that we're talking about, or other folks in these films. It doesn't ever seem like Richard Gere is like the star in terms of like he's stealing the show. It seems like he's really allowing other people to shine based off his performances and what he's giving to a scene. I don't know if that's something that's come across for all of you in these films, but
he's definitely not the Jim Carrey type who takes over every scene and sucks the energy out of the room.
I feel like Richard Gere is very one note and predictable, but I think that is easy because of how charming he is and how handsome he is. I think it's easy for other actors to perform with him.
He's carried by his charisma and he's carried by his charm.
Yes. It's a curse, though. I know what it feels like. So, I mean, it's not easy.
Yeah. It's hard for me to get through the day, to be honest.
I think it kind of speaks to like, I know him from more genre specific stuff, from more romantic stuff.
Mm-hmm.
When he does like a straight drama, it doesn't really hit like that to me, barring Days of Heaven being the exception. And I think it leads to that point, which makes it an excellent point about him as an actor. I didn't rewatch this. I think this movie's great, but I don't know if I'll ever watch it again because I find this movie to be terribly sad. And so I was like, I'm not going to watch it again. But when I was thinking about it, I almost forgot he was in this. He gets outpaced by the people that are with him so much that I think it speaks to your point on that way.
Well, let's toss it to the Cotton Club, that film that Case just will not shut up about. He's ready to talk about Dixie, the first of 3 roles with Diane Lane.
You guys, The Cotton Club is a very intriguing movie about a 1930s jazz club in Harlem. What I like about this movie is it's a very specific time and place film. It's not just looking at the jazz scene in the 30s. I think this movie gets better over time, but like the backside of it is hilarious because they had a hard time with funding. And so this movie has involvement from Hollywood producers, organized crime, casino, Saudi arms dealers, and Texas oil men, just to name a few. There was a murder that was linked to this film, and it's got an incredible cast. Gregory Hines, I love. He's so fun to watch. So I liked this movie the first time I saw it because he was in it. I don't think Richard Gere is great in it. I think it goes to what Aubrey was just talking about. I think he gets outpaced by a lot of really good performances, but I enjoyed watching this movie again.
Francis Ford Coppola is the director.
Francis Coppola, the first time it came out.
Yeah, stacked cast. I see Nick Cage is in that. Might be worth just going to get some early Nick Cage.
Uh-huh.
James Remar.
Remar's really good in it. He plays the infamous Dutch Schultz, and he's really good as like really violent, really anger-driven. He's good.
That doesn't surprise me. All right, okay, so let's swing it from talking about a club in the early 30s to let's talk about, we're going to date us back a few centuries to King David from 1985, which is the lowest critic score.
When I started looking into this movie, the first thing that came to mind is, did I do something to upset Kyle? Because this feels cruel and unusual punishment. So, and also, as a foreshadow, but I do want to remind everybody that, what I say is influenced by 2 facts. Number 1, I'm not a fan of period pieces. Number 2, I don't love movies based on books. So this was a tough watch for me. Not the biggest fan of this type of story.
Yeah, what's the source material, Case? What book is it based on? Was it an adapted screenplay?
It felt like one of those studio war movies I always talk about, where one studio is making a Bible movie, so another studio. It felt like that, but I couldn't find a parallel. But it's about the life of David, the second king of the kingdom of Israel, as recounted in the Hebrew Bible. And it seems to be, from everything I kind of pulled together, it seems to be set on the books of Samuel and Psalms of David. This is not a great film. I don't think Richard Gere's portrayal of King David is even all that. I mean, I thought it was puzzling. There's a scene where he's like supposed to have this triumphant return, and he like strips down to a loincloth. His dancing and his like jumping around, he did not have a gymnastics background, according to that. So it's interesting to hear that. Thought this movie did a pretty good job of painting King David, both his strengths and his weaknesses, and his thirst for power and influence and women and all those things. So, I mean, it was fine, but I just found more downside than upside to this film. I thought the pacing was really erratic, very like sporadic narration. They just hired somebody to like bridge the gap in the poorly written story. Battle scenes were bad. There's a scene where they're trying to show the king is getting attacked, and his son throws a sword from about 50 yards away, and you could see the freeze frame gap between where the guy is swinging the sword at the king to when it goes into his back. You can see it literally jump like 3 frames. The other point that I thought was really funny, and it almost felt like a Mel Brooks element, is that they had very specific quotes from the Bible, but the tone and the way that those were given was completely different than the rest of the dialogue in the movie. It wasn't good. And that being said, though, am I the only one that did not know that King David is the same David from David versus Goliath?
I did not know that, but maybe that's the part that just truly insulted the person who is more well versed on the Bible, where it's like, that's just not fucking. How many Davids could there possibly be? I don't know. I don't know how the Bible is told, but I'm also unaware of David versus Goliath became a king.
The funniest part about that is they portray David as this like very introverted, meek, soft person. And with one flick of a wrist, he slays Goliath and then he beheads him in front of everybody.
As one does.
Yes. All that being said, you guys know that I like to end things on a high note. I wrote a poem about Gere's performance in this movie, in King David. My poem is called David's Divine Grace. A shepherd boy, a kingly sight. Gere's soulful gaze, a beacon bright. With a sling and a harp, he takes a stand, a hero born across the land. A righteous soul, a complex heart. A tragic flaw, a work of art. His passion burns a fiery flame, a kingly reign, forever famed. Thank you.
Okay, so that was a really good poem.
Yep, thank you. It's called David's Divine Grace, starring Richard Gere.
All I read was that the movie's lackluster success led to the cancellation of Scorsese's The Last Temptation of Christ. They were like, ooh, that Bible epic did so poorly, maybe this won't fly. And it took them like 3 years to make the movie.
That might have been the studio race
There you go.
that I was trying to find.
And apparently Rachel Weisz turned down a role at the age of 14 because her parents didn't want to be in it. There was the other IMDb trivia fact for you. Okay, well, 1990, next role we'll talk about. Internal Affairs, he played Dennis Peck. I would say this is one of the few times I saw Gere do like non-typecast. This and The Jackal. This is a better movie than The Jackal. The Jackal's not a very good movie.
No.
But they're the two times I think I've seen Gere play a baddie. I know he's playing a hero in The Jackal, but you don't end up in a maximum security prison without being a piece of shit in the first place. In this movie, he plays the foil to Andy Garcia, and he's not a good guy. He's not a romantic guy. He's a menace.
He will do a lot more like legal and law enforcement roles following this, but this is the first of that line for sure.
Seemed like a little bit of a departure.
Yeah, definitely.
Not a bad flick, though. If you like corruption, cops, and stuff like that. It's just interesting to see him on the other side of the law in that role.
I enjoy him in all these types of roles, Kyle. I agree with you.
It's a change of pace. Gives me something a little bit different to play with.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so the big one, 1990, another Golden Globe nom. Pretty Woman, played Edward with Julia. First of two big rom-com roles with Julia Roberts.
I think if you can put aside the fact that the plot is ridiculous, absolutely delightful movie, and I can do that when it comes to romantic comedies. Most romantic comedies have fairly ridiculous plots. With this, you just get rid of that expectation and enjoy two incredibly attractive people flirting with each other and, cracking jokes. I still very much enjoy this movie.
This is the second movie where he gets to flex his musical abilities.
Mm-hmm.
He can play piano, cornet. The piano scene that he plays in this movie, he composed. It's original.
Yeah. You could tell in that scene. I was like, oh, that's not a stand-in. He's doing that. And it sounds pretty damn good.
This movie is legendary.
It's a pop culture staple.
Yeah.
It's a pop culture staple. Pretty Woman. Everybody knows. Even if you haven't seen it, you've heard of Pretty Woman. Big moneymaker, too.
It's been ripped off like a million times. This movie is like top of the line in terms of like pop culture impact.
The moment the movie starts, it's like they try to set it up as like, oh, it's the seedy underbelly. And then instantaneously, this woman is like just so charming and so nice, and they're hitting it off. It's like classic rom-com stuff, and it's one of those performances that, like you guys mentioned, it was a pop culture phenomenon and still has an impact today.
For sure. And I think like Pretty Woman's interesting because I think it was like 4 or 5 when it came out. And this is still like what I think of when I hear Richard Gere is Pretty Woman. That association is 100% cemented and is nothing else.
Yep.
But to this day, gun to head, if you ask me to recount like what Pretty Woman's about, I will probably tell you the synopsis to Milk Money instead. Because I always get them confused on what's happening where and some of the formative scenes therein. But it's just so interesting how this is like his iconic role. And this era of Richard Gere is probably where I've seen the most of his films. And I will still call him a romantic lead versus all of the other like drama pieces that he does kind of around here. It's just interesting how this is like what has stuck to him probably the most.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm really excited to talk about how we end up marrying this little known woman. I don't know if you guys have heard of her. Her name is Cindy Crawford. I think I don't know. He dated 4 other models at the time. She might have been big time between 91 and 95. I don't know. You know, the biggest supermodel in the world.
Yeah.
It's just wild, these guys.
The iconic freckle.
Back then, and I might have just been naive, but I never felt like a lot of these relationships were like PR moves. I felt like the two of them got married because there was a genuine love for each other, whereas a lot of times now we're really cynical and we're like, oh yeah, Kelsey and Swift are together because it's a PR stunt. Whereas back then I didn't feel like that happened very often, and I never felt that way about this relationship.
That's an interesting case because this is, it's before social media. And so the only way people would get news about someone being a couple is paparazzi and the couple essentially announcing it. And so a lot of times the news that people in Hollywood did get was negative news, where it's like, hey, this couple's clearly fighting and on drugs at the club, and it's like young up and coming stars. And for them, it was like, hey, the 2 most famous hot people got together, and I think they're going to get married. Look at them. That's great.
Well, same time frame. Given his background with the Tibetan people, he started the Gere Foundation. Very few actors we've covered have created their own foundation like this. I mean, a lot of them create their own production companies, but not a lot of them create their actual own foundations, and they're still in existence. And so it started in 91. Its primary mission is to assist the cultural survival of the Tibetan people through health, technological, and educational products. So my man went out, created a whole ass organization to align with the work he was trying to do. Pretty cool.
Still running today, and it's absolutely part of the reason why he's still banned from China, because he didn't say it just to stir the pot. He really believes what he was saying.
And his involvement in this goes back to that early relationship that he was in, correct?
Yeah, with Sylvia Martins. That's when he got into Buddhism.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. That's my understanding from what I read.
Truth be told, until tonight, I had no idea what his deal was with Buddhism.
He's so into the Tibetan culture and Buddhism that like he has many times had very close relations like with the Dalai Lama. Like couldn't be more about it than he is. So it's not someone being like, hey, this is wrong. I think
A casual.
Yeah.
I'm going to use my platform to bring light to this. It's like, no, this is truly part of who I am. Fuck you. And they're like, cool, you're never allowed to come here ever again. He's like, you think I give a shit? Fuck you. He's like, okay.
He says, I'm going to go be in this HBO TV film called And the Band Played On in 1993, which is our highest critic score.
Nice.
He plays the choreographer.
It's smooth, buddy. That was smooth.
Thanks, man. I struck gold on this one. While Case had to watch King David, I got this gem from 1993. It has a 100% on Rotten Tomatoes, 88 audience score, so very highly reviewed by many folks over the years. So it's not like hey, there were only 5 reviews. Like there's a lot of reviews. Definitely one of the highest by being 100%. Very, very rarely do we run into a legit 100% on Rotten Tomatoes film to cover. It won 3 Emmys for casting, editing, and outstanding TV movie. No acting nominations, but that's only because other than Matthew Modine, there's a million actors in this movie. So like, how could everyone get nominated at the end of the day? But it's based on a book. NBC spent 2 years trying to adapt the book, but they withdrew in 1989, which led HBO to picking it up and following through and making the story. It's the story of the discovery of the AIDS epidemic and the infighting between the scientific community during the rise of the Reagan administration. So Dennis Quaid episode shout out. James said some really nice things about Ronald Reagan in that episode. You should definitely go listen to that. He is Reagan's #1 fan.
Well, dude, they really covered very accurately this whole story you're about to share. It was those pesky AIDS protesters trying to diminish his legacy, as we all remember it.
This is big for Richard Gere because he broke the mold in Hollywood. At the time, it was considered faux pas to be a big Hollywood star and take small roles in TV movies. He broke ranks, stepped into this role as a choreographer, which if you do the research on it, you learn he was playing a character named Michael Bennett, a famous choreographer who died of AIDS in 1987. And he's memorialized at the end of the film. So while the credits say the choreographer, everybody behind the scenes who knew the story kind of knew who he was. But because of him taking on the role, other folks like Steve Martin, Alan Alda, Phil Collins, and Angelica Houston all followed suit and took on similar small but important roles in the movie. So I thought that was a pretty cool little fun fact about Richard Gere.
Very cool.
Gere is on screen for maybe 4 minutes, 4 or 5 minutes. I mean, he's in 2 to 3 scenes. He might be in only 2 scenes, but he plays one of the many characters that are dealing with the epidemic. His character, Michael Bennett, doesn't show. He shows up in the film at a point when they're showcasing that the incubation periods with the disease they're varied, and so he's not experiencing any symptoms at the time versus others who are experiencing them very aggressively and very fast. But he does a good job of expressing, without saying a word, the mental struggle that he's experiencing of, I'm not having the symptoms, but I'm pretty sure I know what I have and where this is going to take me. And there's some still scenes that he's in where the camera just kind of pans to his gaze, and you can sense that heartbreak he's experiencing. So while he doesn't have to carry a lot in this film, he does a pretty good job with his character. But I would say that I know there's some controversy about the whole concept of patient zero in this film and how it's portrayed by the film and the book, and whether that was legitimate, because the film basically frames around this flight attendant who's played by Jeffrey Nording, who, if you don't know who Jeffrey Nording is, it caught me completely off guard. He's Coach Orion from D3, The Mighty Ducks, and it's him with a French accent. And I had a double take. I was like, wait, is that who I think it is? Because you can't tell in the first scene, but the second scene, when they're like, this dude's apparently sleeping with everybody across the world, I guess there's a lot of controversy about whether that's really how that went down. But I don't know. I watched this movie, and it just reminded me a lot of COVID of the past couple. It was almost triggering in that way of like, we're in the middle of a health epidemic. We're dealing with something that people may not know a ton about, and they did a good job of kind of showing how fear was raising in lots of different communities, and how everybody's searching for answers, but and then how money plays into all of this, right? With even the blood industry, when they're like, hey, you've got contaminated blood, and whether or not they wanted to, and now they're subject to a ton of lawsuits because of it. And fascinating film, heavy topic, excellent story. But I'm interested in you guys and your perspectives if you watched it as well.
So this is a film that I saw, I think, in college in like a human sexuality course that we watched. And being, a gay man, like the AIDS epidemic is a hallmark of the 80s. And there's a lot of things that get thrown around of like, oh, there were no gay people around in like the 60s, 70s, 80s. Well, there were, and most of them died because of this. It was really interesting kind of going back to this movie, especially with COVID, like you kind of said, and kind of understanding a little bit more of the dynamics at play, and kind of what do you trust, what don't you trust, but also the speed and efficiency at which immunization can happen, and what we kind of know now, and what the AIDS epidemic itself led us to be prepared for other epidemics like this. The one thing about the film that I always find is really interesting is that it centers around San Francisco and the AIDS activists there and gay men there. But towards the end of it, and the main focus of it, is that infighting the scientific community and kind of against Reagan for getting funding for this to fight the virus, not to necessarily save gay people. And it's really not until a wealthy white woman gets a blood transfusion that's straight that this actually blows up and becomes something that's in the public's eye.
Yep.
So it's really interesting kind of it's taking that point, but also showcasing a lot of gay men at this time, kind of what the sexual liberation movement was doing, and why there was such a fight over bathhouses and what that really meant. So it plays in that field without like really diving too far into kind of what gay rights activists and AIDS activists were really doing to focus on that scientific portion. So it's a fascinating film.
Yeah, it gives you a particular perspective. We got 3 films we'll talk about before our next review, and the first one's Primal Fear. Plays Martin, the hotshot defense lawyer who takes on the altar boy played by Edward Norton, who allegedly murders a priest, and pretty iconic little like psychological thriller.
I think Richard Gere is great I think this is his wheelhouse, the charming, smart, but also a little slimy, a little conniving, but kind of authentic about that sliminess. I think he's fantastic in this, but I think this movie works because they found a young, incredible actor by the name of Edward Norton who was able to be the center of this movie as this young kid. Like, if that's a bad teenage actor, this movie's a disaster. But because it ends up being Edward Norton, I think this movie still holds up.
100% agree. I love this movie. I was so happy when I saw it come up. I was like, oh, Richard Gere's in this? Heck yeah. I'm absolutely going to watch this. And it's fantastic. It's my kind of like psychological thriller. I'm a sucker for all of this. What it does, the courtroom drama of it all. Like, it's great. It's a good just sit on the couch and watch something fun.
It builds up nicely.
Yep.
Like his anger level, and it does a good job of giving you little snippets along the way. The Jackal, 97. He plays Declan, the Irish hired gun criminal that they bring in to track down the Jackal, who's played by Bruce Willis, who basically the Russians hire to take out the director of the FBI after an arrest gone wrong overseas. Play in Sidney Poitier's last on-screen role, which is so disappointing.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
An early Jack Black?
Or early Jack Black, yeah.
Some strange characters in this movie.
I read that he did a lot of training with the Irish accent. I wanted to dunk on the Irish accent. I couldn't find a lot of opportunities to dunk on it, which was sad because I wanted to come in and be like, it was atrocious. It wasn't, but I just don't think Gere has that gear, not to be punny, but to be punny, to play that kind of character. I just don't know if he has it in him. Like, there wasn't a lot of gravitas in the Jet, like him as Declan hunting down the Jackal. Back with Julia, Runaway Bride, 99, plays Ike, a movie that is not anywhere near as good as Pretty Woman. It is. This movie's boring. It's just boring.
Spent a lot of money on it. 70 mil.
Wow.
Let's run it back with these two and the money is spent on the two of them agreeing to be in this movie. That is where the vast majority of this budget goes. It's, yeah, I mean, I'll do it if Julia does it, and we're both only going to do it if you pay us a fuck ton of money. And they're like, sure, let's do it.
Done.
This movie's plot is bona fide ridiculous. How many weddings did she run out on? Why? And why would she?
She ran out on 2.
The three's a charm.
This is an odd movie.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, romantic comedy plots can be whatever. They don't bother me all that much. I mean, I prefer just a straight up and down, setup though. Like, this person just works here and they just meet each other. I prefer that than an elaborate setup. But like, this movie is just odd because I don't understand his job and why he wrote about her in the first place. I don't understand how he's supposed to save his career by following her around and writing about her and her marriage. I don't understand why they're together. I don't understand any of it. This movie's weird.
Mm-hmm.
It's not fun, and it needs to be fun. It's just not fun.
That is a hallmark of rom-coms. They should be fun.
I don't want to be too harsh, but Julia Roberts is almost always fun.
Yes.
And she isn't the reason this movie is not fun.
Oh, no.
It's kind of how I look at it.
Okay.
I had no problem following some of the stuff around that she was doing. But Richard Gere's like, I hate women. I'm going to be this charming but terrible person, was not interesting at all.
Some would say he's ahead of his time. Guys like that make a lot of money these days.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, they wouldn't have turned at the end, though.
That's fair. Yeah, they would have stuck to it.
As James said, capturing that money bag, trying to get it after Pretty Woman. Yeah, what it was.
Not a bad bet.
No. I mean, given how much it made, give it a shot. Like working together.
Kyle, are we going to skip over Red Corner?
I don't even know what a Red Corner is. So
what? Red Corner? It's like a 97 or 98 movie where Richard Gere, as a hotshot TV producer, takes on the Chinese government in China on their home court.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. It's hilarious.
I had no idea.
I'll just read this real quick. It's a 1997 film. I'll read you the first sentence of Roger Ebert's review. Red Corner is a contrived and cumbersome thriller designed to showcase Richard Gere's unhappiness with Red China, which it does with such thoroughness that story and characters are enveloped in the gloom. The Chinese do this better to themselves. That's according to Roger Ebert.
That's a great review.
Yeah, the only reason I bring this up is because we have not had an actor who has used their platform and their art to attack their enemies nearly to this level. And it's hilarious to me. It's not a good movie.
An enemy being one of the biggest international powers
Oh yeah.
in the world.
As in the country of
That's
China.
what I mean.
He gets assigned a female lawyer in China in the 90s. He gets her to fall in love with him. She breaks the law for him. It is some wild sci-fi shit. And Roger Ebert did not like it, and neither did I. But it is worth bringing up just because it's part of his beef with China.
I appreciate you bringing that up. Well, let's skip past the millennium and get to our largest audience gap, which Ed, our guest Munson, has, and it is the romantic masterpiece, potentially question mark, called Autumn in New York. He plays Will.
Man, we've talked about it a little bit, but there are some roles in some films that Richard Gere has been a part of that do not age well, and this may be the icing on the cake of roles that do not age well.
Oh, no.
It is not necessarily a romantic comedy. There's not a lot of laughs in it. There are a few here and there. But it stars Gere as Will Keane. He is a 48-year-old owner of a booming restaurant in New York City. And Winona Ryder, who plays Charlotte, who is 22 in the film. She's an artist and has a terminal heart condition. It's very over the top, and it's nearly sickly sweet and soft in how it is telling the story and the way that it's portrayed and acted and shot. It kind of is asking you to look beyond the age gap here and your experience with love to be more open to unique forms of love. Will Keane is kind of like the shallow, very edgy, and maintains kind of a classic Gere like coolness about him. He's playing this role very well. Winona Ryder has like a quirkiness, aloofness to her that she's been known for. So they're kind of just bringing themselves kind of forward in these roles, but it doesn't connect. It doesn't really ever seem like there's enough actual passion between these two to really make you think this is a relationship that's trying to transcend age barriers and whatever it is. It just is playing out. I will say there are some pretty good scenes throughout this, and they are mostly without Gere. So kind of as we've talked about a little bit before, Gere is kind of like the springboard that's kind of elevating other stars. But in this, between Winona Ryder and her grandmother, who's iconic Elaine Stritch, is a scene where after Keane's character cheats on Winona Ryder's character, she goes back to her grandmother to really just like confront, like, why aren't you looking out for me? In this situation. What you also find out is that Winona Ryder's character, her mother, dated Keane previously, and Keane had ended that relationship by kind of ghosting her when she got too many feelings. So there's a weird family connection with this man and dating both the mother and eventually the daughter. A couple other twists that this movie kind of takes us along with. So it has Vera Farmiga in it, who shows up as Keane's daughter. Long estranged, she's pregnant with her son and wants to meet her father. In the scene between the two, she asks him, "Hey, did you ever look for me?" And he tells her, "No, I didn't." So it's kind of like just a really weird stuff. He is not a great person, not doing a lot of great things, and everyone's seeing kind of the man that he is, and no one is trying to stop him from pursuing this love interest with a 22-year-old. Charlotte's worsening heart condition comes up a couple of times throughout the film, and it's really prompting Keane to start looking at his life and what he's willing to do to save this love that he has found. He goes so far as to forge her signature on medical documents for a surgery that she has said she does not want if it is her time to go. He flies out to Ohio to meet a surgeon behind her back to see if he can get someone that's willing to operate on her heart if things get too dire. Who turns out is played by J.K. Simmons. Does a great little stint here. So this all leads up to right around Christmas time. Charlotte gets sick. She passes out. J.K. flies in to try and do what he can. And spoiler alert, Charlotte does not make it. So this is a very kind of downer that kind of allows Keane to reevaluate his life, how he sees women in general, and forge forward with a relationship with his estranged daughter, who has helped him find this surgeon, and to help take care of her new son. Critics largely with this film called it utterly banal, a sappy romance, and my favorite quote for it is, "Melodrama is bad enough, contrived melodrama is worse, and badly written contrived melodrama is Autumn in New York." Gere kind of brings his effortlessly cool acting to the film, but it serves the terrible part of his character really well, not the redeeming kind of I am worth saving aspect of it. But overall, I'm a big fan of believing that rom-coms or romantic films try to teach us something about love. So there's two things that I took from this and kind of that theme. One, love is a powerful force. It can restore even the most jaded people into believing in it and healing them. And two, it doesn't hurt if your sugar daddy is both rich and hot. So get it, girl. I get it.
And that's Autumn in New York. That was
And
really
that's
funny.
Autumn in New York.
Yeah, it's one of the worst movies I've seen for this podcast in a bit. It was pretty bad.
Whoa. Okay.
I just didn't like the way specifically how he played his character. He was trying to do this mix of unintentional, like just the scene when she comes over, it's framed as he's manipulating her. So like lean into that character choice, but he's drawing this line between I'm actually being naive and I'm a manipulator. And you can never truly tell which route he's going. Like, I want you to lean one way or the other. I don't think it's artful, that balance, that teeter-totter that he was doing there. I don't know. I didn't like it. Like, fully embrace that you've manipulated this woman to come to your place. That's the character you're really playing, right? Is kind of like a sleazeball. Up to this point, if you slept with, like, everybody in the city. So, like, lean into that character choice. But we got 11 years before our last review. So first and foremost, married Carrie Lowell in 2001. They were together for 12 years, married for 12 years. They had a son named Homer. In 2000, he was 50 when he became a papa. So he was a little bit later in life when he joined the dad game. I read that apparently their divorce was like super high profile. It took like 3 years for the divorce to close up and finish up there in the mid 2010s. So that probably wasn't terribly fun. But they got a son out of that relationship. Good for them. Mothman prophecies alongside Laura Linney in 2002. He played a character named John. You give it a little bit of this.
Give it the fist bump. I love this movie. I love the Mothman prophecies.
Oh yeah, I enjoyed this movie. This changed a supernatural thriller.
Mm-hmm.
The first time he's done anything like this. As a Laura Linney fan, I would imagine you would enjoy this movie quite a bit. He gives a good performance. She gives a really good performance. It's a good movie.
I do love Laura Linney. She's fantastic. Very underrated. Of all of his films, and Case and James, you can spot check me on this, but I think the movie he was paid the most for was his role as Edward in Unfaithful. He got paid $15 million to be the husband of Diane Lane as she goes off and I want to say slowly, but quickly becomes smitten with another gentleman.
Very quickly.
What's a good word to describe this film? Steamy?
Yeah.
Amazing. This movie is so close to being actually very, very good.
I agree.
It's so close to getting there.
I think it's a really good movie anyways.
It is good.
What stops it from you from getting all the way there?
I think the way you make this movie interesting is instead of in the third act, Richard Gere murders the dude, you have a more thoughtful kind of resolution, a confrontation of what's actually going on. Because up until this point, the movie is like, I mean, it's scandalous in the fact that this won't, like, that there's sex happening, but it's actually not really like wild.
No.
It's just a woman having an affair, sometimes in public. So like that, like I don't find this movie to be like wild in that way. I find it to be like a full, I'm just going to show you what this would actually look like. But a lot of what Diane Lane is doing is internal and how she's managing it.
Especially when she's breaking down on the train after the first time.
And then in the third act, it goes left. Now this is a movie that's more melodrama than it is like actually playing off of what makes this story compelling.
And I agree with you, Aubrey, because I think maybe a more nuanced approach would be like likening to the movie The Lovers that we covered with what's his name, Tracy Letts from a few years ago, where they're cheating on each other the whole film and it finally comes to an end. No one dies, but it's about them coming to terms with what this means for our relationship. I think James reviewed it in one of our episodes. But what I do like about after the whole death part happens is it's one of those like I have to lean into it to protect you type of situation. So now we're both complicit in this situation. It's really unfair. I at least appreciated they went all in with the concept of it. She didn't just like film on the bus.
Yeah.
It's like, ooh, neither of us want our dirty laundry out there. So we're going to have to live this lie together, which I think is dark as hell.
Yeah.
Don't hear me wrong. This movie's still good.
Yeah.
It was very close to being a different movie and also being very, very good. But I enjoy this movie just off the merits of what was given.
And I like Gere. I think Gere is great.
Yeah.
In his role, I think he does a really good job.
We've seen this storyline before, but it's flipped, where normally it's the guy having the affair, things go sideways, think Fatal Attraction. It's the wife trying to lean into it and cover things up, or taking the action. And then in this way, it's Diane Lane being given the control and the authority to take this plot. And I'm a Diane Lane fan, so obviously I loved it.
Who's not a Diane Lane fan?
Whoever it is, I don't trust them.
To that point, Case, that's one of the things I like about this movie now, is that it is doing something different in terms of putting her in that place.
Mm-hmm.
It's also a movie that's not judging her for what she's doing.
Yep.
Even though, like, we can all internalize and understand that she's in the wrong and she's doing bad things, the movie's not judging her for that. And the fact that it is more or less random. It's a movie about how easy and accessible bad choices are.
Yeah, that's a good point.
That's what I really like about it. It's just like, this was random. You have an opportunity, and instead of, when you acknowledge that opportunity, being like, no, this would be a bad idea, you're just like,
lean in.
Yeah, why not? And that's so compelling, especially for a woman in that position. The first half of this movie is at times very, very interesting.
Well, let's go to his, I guess, biggest award win of his career, because he was shut out from the Oscars for however long, and he won a Golden Globe for his role as Billy in Chicago alongside Renee Zellweger, Christine Baranski, and Lucy Liu.
This is a completely different Richard Gere than I'd ever seen. I watched it right before we got on.
This is another movie where I never think of him, though.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
Well, yeah.
I know he's in it, but
The cast of actresses are just powerhouses, so the characters like his get lost.
Yeah.
And that's really interesting, because I kind of think the opposite. Like, I don't immediately assume Richard Gere with Chicago, with the powerhouse actresses that are in it. But in terms of what he gives in this performance, it is the most kind of like drama forward, larger than life. I'm not really playing it cool. Like, I'm very robust in my performance here.
Yep.
I love seeing this version of him, and love what he brings to the film and how he plays off the other characters. This like kind of redeemed the Richard Gere from my childhood that I actively avoided every movie that I could with him in it, to being like, oh, this dude's pretty good. Like, I love Chicago.
He's a lawyer, right, in the film?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I echo Ed's sentiment.
Yeah, he's a much better dancer in this than he was in King David.
Everyone in this movie who does have a dance scene, it is so clear that they trained as hard and were fully committed to nailing that dance scene. And Richard Gere is no different. I believe he trained for close to 5 months for his tap dance scene, because he does not have the dancing abilities. He was a stage actor, but he's not a song and dance man by any stretch of the imagination. And so similar to Renee Zellweger, when you see Catherine Zeta-Jones get up there and absolutely crush it, you're like, I'll pay whoever I need to pay to make me not look like a loser next to her. And I think he crushes the tap dance scene.
Yeah.
I do think the other two stars of the movie I think they better perform in their roles. But I agree with that. I think he's good in this movie. It's good next to great.
Yeah.
And so it looks less than, in my opinion. But as Billy Flynn, and he's like, you're used to Gere being suave, and he's suave, but you're also used to him being like a lady killer. And he is no bullshit, just saying nothing to these women about anything sexual. And it's just like, yeah, if you pay me, I'll do whatever. And he's like, well, there's other ways I could pay you. He's like, nope, there's one way you can pay me, and it is $5,000 cash in hand. He's like, that is the only way this is going to work. I promise you.
And credit where credit's due, a non-trained dancer doing a Bob Fosse style musical is insane.
Yeah.
I just want to echo that sentiment of it's good. And unfortunately, it's good next to great, but it is still good.
And I love the point you made, Ed. This is 30 years in his career, and this is really the first time that he's being encouraged to be over the top. That's crazy, because we usually see in that first 5 to 10 years of somebody's career, a director gets somebody and they're like, go take it over the top. And then they're criticized for that, then they pull back. But here, it's taken 30 years for a director to go, hey, go for it.
Let loose.
He is also one of the only actors in the history of the Academy Awards to be nominated for his role as Best Actor in most of the major competitions and not receive a nomination for the Academy Award. I bet you could guess why, but they gave him an invitation.
You don't get a seat at our table, sir.
Yeah, you're allowed to show up, but we're not going to acknowledge your existence at this award show. It's crazy because it's like one of the few people where like the conspiracy theory, oh, they're out to get me, is 100% proven fact.
Yeah.
Well, do you think he leveraged his 5 months of dance training to star alongside J-Lo in Shall We Dance in 2004, alongside Susan Sarandon and Stanley Tucci as well? You figured, I spent all this time and energy. Why don't I go dance with J-Lo?
Yeah.
I enjoyed this movie. I really did.
I do too. Yeah, it's a good flick. I watched it for the first time for the Stanley Tucci episode, and I didn't rewatch it, but I remember enjoying it.
Mm-hmm.
Aubrey, did you and the wifey enjoy it when you watched it?
No.
Not a fan?
She had already seen it, and she kind of gave me a heads up. I walked away from this. My exact quote was when this was over was, if I was on that J-Lo episode, she'd have a very different score. I thought that she was like actively bad in this.
That's so funny.
I think the movie's funny at times. There's people I like Bobby Cannavale is always a good time. The Stanley Tucci's doing fun stuff. So there's elements of it that are fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Tucci's fun.
It's not like a terrible movie that's like the worst thing I've ever seen. But like, I don't think Richard Gere is overly good in it. It also doesn't play to literally any of his strengths, I don't think.
Oh, he's definitely out of type. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. None of Susan Sarandon, and I think J-Lo is bad. So, like, it's just like the top line of this is not working for me. So the rest of it's not really going to work. But I mean, it's a perfectly fine film.
There you go. Case, what about I'm Not There alongside Michelle Williams? Plays a version of Bob Dylan, right?
He sure does. This movie is a very artistic look at the life and times of Bob Dylan. And it's being talked about a lot lately because of the Timothée Chalamet movie that's coming out about Bob Dylan.
Complete unknown.
But what's interesting is this movie has, I think, 4 or 5 different versions of Bob Dylan during different parts of his life. And it's a very abstract look at it. I really enjoyed this movie because I like Bob Dylan. It was a very original and like artistic way of looking at somebody's life without doing a straight biopic. He plays the Wild West version of Bob Dylan, and I love that version especially because Bob Dylan played Billy the Kid. The song Knocking on Heaven's Door was written by Bob Dylan for that movie, and that movie starred Bob Dylan and Chris Christopherson. A lot of really important music history comes from that movie, and he plays a version attached to that time in his life, so it's really interesting.
You remember that time he was arrested at an AIDS awareness rally in India in 2007? The man doesn't give a fuck.
Did you hear the story as to why he was arrested?
No.
So one, it was a AIDS rally for truckers in India. He was there with a bunch of celebrities, and while he is there and they're promoting it, he is with a famous Bollywood actress, and they do like a little dance move together to like, this is talking about like wearing condoms, right? And so they're playing off the sexual kind of chemistry thing. And he dips her and he gives her a kiss on the cheek. That's it.
Big no. No, sir.
That's obscenity or something. And he like completely ignored. He's like, nah, it's just a small political group is trying to, make a name for themselves. It's all bullshit. And the judges agreed with him, but it didn't stop him from getting arrested.
And like even crazier for this, like for him, the actress that he did kiss didn't get cleared of charges until January of 2022 for obscenity charges.
What?
Mm-hmm.
So she was also taken in and was tried through multiple courts for obscenity. And like I said, it was like January 2022 where she was finally cleared of those obscenity charges.
15 years later.
It's crazy.
Mm-hmm. Well, every episode we get to the part of the show that James loves, and that's when we talk about dog movies. And he was in Hachi's A Dog's Tale. I played Parker and a producer of the film in 2009. At one point, this movie was on the IMDb Top 250. That's how I first watched this many moons ago. I didn't rewatch this, but it's a very well-rated film by critics and audiences alike.
Mm-hmm.
I remember it being good. I just don't remember much about it. James, we're going to need can you give us a quick rundown? I can't remember if Hachi dies or not.
Dude, I love this fucking website. DoesTheDogDie.com. Hachi, they're like, do you want to click on the spoilers? The first question is, does the dog die? And the first response is, this movie is the epitome of a dog dying.
It's the best. He goes back to his Golden Globe nom bag in Arbitrage from 2012 alongside Tim Roth, Susan Sarandon. I remember Rigby's a big fan of this movie, and it's another movie with really good reviews from the critics.
Another movie in this time, Kyle, is the Nights in Rodanthe.
Diane Lane. But more importantly, this is the movie that peaked his IMDb meter. This was the highest he had ever been at 17. Not Pretty Woman. This movie was the one that got him his highest ranking in the IMDb star meter. Yeah, Arbitrage is a pretty damn good movie. It's one I generally try to recommend to people if they have a chance to see it. But what I don't recommend is movie 43. It's our second episode in a row with a movie 43 reference, so we're up to 6 actors now.
7.
Kristen Bell, Chloe Grace Moretz, Chris Pratt, Dennis Quaid, and who am I missing?
Sean William Scott.
I always forget him for some reason. Yeah, not a good thing if you're in movie 43.
Nope.
Terrible. And it's technically lowest critic score. It's a moonlit lowest critic score, so we can't just keep covering that movie, but we will mention if you're in it. But let's see if Time Out of Mind is any better. The largest critic gap from 2014, a movie that features Steve Buscemi, and Aubrey has it.
Okay, so Time Out of Mind, 2014 movie. This is is it Oren Moverman? Directed a couple of other kind of small things. The Dinner's one of them. He's got a couple other things. He's a very interesting director. It stars Richard Gere and Jenna Malone, Steve Buscemi, a little bit of Jeremy Strong. And essentially, it's Richard Gere is homeless. He's kind of navigating homelessness. While we kind of watch him navigate homelessness, we kind of start to get the background of his story filled in. And the main conflict is with his daughter, who they don't have a good relationship with, and he, at various times throughout the film, tries to mend that. And it's really just him coming to terms with his homelessness. This movie is very slow-paced. It's very meditative. It's very like you watch Richard Gere lay on a bench for 30 seconds, and then it's a cut to him like in a different position on the bench for 45 seconds. It's very much like that. So on its face, this sounds like a movie that I would be very into. And it's why I said what I said about Days of Heaven earlier, because this is the opposite of that. I struggled with this movie because I felt like what was being done served no point. It felt more like, hey, homelessness sucks. This guy's life is awful. Roll credits. And that's not really interesting to me.
Yeah.
I think Richard Gere's doing something that I hadn't seen him do up to this point in his career. He's fully homeless, doing the whole bit. They even like comment on his handsomeness. You know, someone at the homeless shelter calls him handsome. He's like, I'm not handsome. And they do that whole thing. But a lot of movie stars do this. You know, you dirty up for a role and, you know, you show everyone how different you are. I think he struggles to carry this because it's a meditative, internal movie that the themes are supposed to be drawn upon from what the actor's doing. And so I talked about this a ton when we talked about Michelle Williams and why I think she's great, because she's an actor that can pull these type of things out. Heavy themes about homelessness and how we treat, you know, people that are unhoused, and how we treat people that are on hard times, and how you deal with trauma, and how you deal with relationships, and how all of this stuff paints the world that we're in. The way that this movie is shot is for Richard Gere to bring those things out, and they don't always come across. However, Jenna Malone is amazing. She's in the movie for a very short amount of time. The first time she talks to Richard Gere is an hour and 15 minutes into the movie, and I was captivated anytime she was on screen. I'm a Jenna Malone fan. I think she's great all the time. She is particularly good in this. I wish there was more of that. If you like these type of movies, I'd say give it a whirl. If you don't, stay far away from this. So my Kelly Reichardt haters on here, those of you that haven't evolved to the higher plane of existence that we live on, you guys should not watch this movie. I do not recommend this for you, because this is a bad version of that.
I feel like since he's a producer on this and he's been trying to do work with homelessness for a while, it's just like a passion project for him. He's like, you know, and I'd love to be at the center of this story.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't see it, but I'm guessing that's probably the motivation behind it.
He probably had to get it made.
Mm-hmm.
We'll fund it, but you got to do it.
Yeah.
I don't want to be harsh, but I just don't think, from what I've seen from his work, he doesn't have the chops to bring this across in the style that it was presented.
Yeah.
There's too much placed on his shoulders.
Mm-hmm. Kind of rounding out his career here, Norman. He played Norman Oppenheimer in 2016, a film that I read that of all the roles he's played in his career, once he got accepted to come back into the Academy's arms, this was the one that was getting a little bit of Oscar buzz. It didn't really get any other precursor nominations, though, but I think it's probably the closest he's gotten since he was allowed back. But then we go to The Dinner, in which I think Aubrey mentioned the same director as Time Out of Mind, alongside Laura Linney, Rebecca Hall, which is really funny about this is like we're getting to these quartet dinner films. So like The Dinner, Dinner with Friends, where we've knocked out 3 of the 4 main actors. You know, Dinner with Friends, we've done Quaid, McDowell, and Collette. We're just waiting on Kinnear, and in this one, with Gere, Linney, and Rebecca Hall. So we're kind of waiting on Steve Coogan. Aubrey, it sounds like you've got some thoughts on The Dinner.
So I'm going to do this in the way that my kids do it. Respectfully, this movie sucks. I'm here for Rebecca Hall.
I agree.
All things Rebecca Hall, I'm here for. She can do no wrong in my eyes.
Mm-hmm.
She looks great in this, and for what she's given, she does great. Let's move her aside. What this movie's trying to accomplish and do is odd to me. I don't really understand it. I don't understand the stylistic choices the director makes. I think Coogan is trying the best he can to make this work, but I don't even really understand what his character is dealing with. This was a DNF. I stopped it because like we had to eat dinner, so my son came downstairs, and then I never even thought about putting it back on. I got to the part where they set the unhoused person on fire, and I'm just like, what are we doing?
Those kids suck.
They're the worst, but their parents are the worst. This movie just never comes together. The concept is interesting. The idea that their sons have done something bad and they have to come together and work out a solution is interesting. But the movie, from what I saw, only did that for like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
The rest of it was just nonsense. It's just disappointing.
It's not very good. It's a lot of insufferable people around a dinner table.
Mm-hmm.
We called the drag on my soul. Don't go see this. That's what we're telling you. Go watch Dinner with Friends. It's better. The last little bit of relationship tidbit here. He married Alejandra Silva in 2018. Still together. Had 2 sons together. And he recently moved to Spain, I believe, because he went on the talk show circuit and basically said, she gave me 5-6 years here, so I'm going to go live overseas for a little bit. He's doing that thing. He's still working, clearly. He's kept himself relatively busy since then. He had 4 to 5 projects between 2019 and 2024. He's older, so he doesn't have to work a ton. I'm sure he's made plenty of money in his career. Yeah, he's happily married and now living abroad and back on doing the circuits, and with the agency out and about too. He's back in the spotlight a little bit. Every time I turn on Paramount Plus, there's the agency ad staring at me in the face. And apparently it's a good show.
Very good. Filmed in London, so it makes sense why he's living over in Spain.
What's his role, Casey? Is he a diplomat?
The U.S. CIA office in London, he's in charge of that.
Oh, okay.
So he answers to 1 or 2 people, but then everybody answers to him. He's really good.
That falls in nicely with the type of role he could excel at.
Mm-hmm.
Like most actors, you get late in your career, you've already gone through the let's experiment phase. If I just need like a steady paycheck, I'll just do what I know I'm good at. I'm glad that he's found a project late in his career like this that is pretty well received by folks.
And Jeffrey Wright's incredible on that show as well, but that goes without saying.
Incredible in literally everything.
Jeffrey Wright can do no wrong.
Yeah, that guy is a god.
All right, Case, top performances. What do you got for us?
I found a ranking list from the Women's World magazine, February 20th, 2024.
Ooh.
Titled Richard Gere Movies Ranked, Our 10 Favorite Films Starring the Silver Fox.
Oh, John Slattery wants to have a word.
Mm-hmm.
No, he doesn't.
That's what I'm hearing.
No, he definitely doesn't want to have words with Richard Gere. That'll end in one way. Richard Gere's fist. Or the subtitle to this is, Did you know he's also a musician?
Oh, well, that's if you're going to cue it up for me, then give me American Gigolo.
American Gigolo is number 2. Only one of the movies did not even come up. 2 of them we spoke about briefly, but everything else we had conversations or reviewed.
I'll go.
Chicago is number 5.
Pretty Woman.
Pretty Woman is not on the list. Just kidding. It's number 1.
Yeah, of course.
Officer and a Gentleman.
Good guess.
Officer and a Gentleman is number 4.
All right, now we just need number 3. So let's take this seriously. What would else be in the top 5?
I will say I was surprised by this because on top, we did not have a flattering conversation about this movie.
Is it Autumn in New York?
Autumn in New York is not on the list.
Okay. Well,
Okay, good.
So you got to think this is a popular movie, but we did not necessarily share that.
Runaway Bride. Runaway Bride.
Runaway Bride is number 3.
Shall We Dance?
Shall We Dance is not on the list.
Primal Fear is 100% on that list.
You got to remember, this is from Women's World magazine. Primal Fear is number 6.
That's exactly how I hope that went.
I think Women's World is smart enough to know the Jackal doesn't qualify, so we're going to take that off.
The Jackal is number 8.
Is it really?
Yes.
Unfaithful.
Unfaithful is not on the list.
Wow. Mothman Prophecies.
Yeah.
Mothman Prophecies is not on the list.
Oh, bummer.
So I will say one of the 3 remaining we reviewed, one we didn't talk about at all, and another one was mentioned briefly by me.
For the one that we didn't talk about, give me the best exotic marigold hotel.
The long-ass movie you just said is not on the list.
Days of Heaven.
Days of Heaven is number 7. Days of Heaven, number 7. Oh, it's a night of rhyming, boys. You see that?
Ours.
Is Hachi on there? I can't imagine that it is.
It's possible.
Hachi is not on the list.
But I don't know. What else did you briefly mention?
Nights in Rodanthe.
Oh, Nights
in Rodanthe is number 10. And the one that we did not mention that is on here is Summersby from 1993.
That one's off the radar.
Did you hear that? Summersby, 1993. Continues to rhyme.
Ours.
Don't worry. Hey, you guys, there's more rhyming coming up. Don't worry.
You throw this guy out. Throw him out. I'll tell you what.
The top 5, Pretty Women, American Gigolo, Runaway Bride, Officer and Gentleman, and Chicago. I don't love number 3, but I enjoyed a list that had that on there.
Flip that with Primal Fear, and you got yourself a bona fide top 5.
Put that with Unfaithful, and you've got yourself a bona fide top 5.
Top 6.
He's got a lot of good movies. A lot of good movies.
Okay. All right. Let's get into the Munson Meter. What we do, we rank every actor on a scale of 0 to 100 based on a variety of factors. It could include anything from longevity, project choice, pop culture impact, their acting range, awards footprint, other talents, personal life, comedic chops, box office success, or anything else that matters to us as Munsons. With that said, we will start this time with James.
Richard Gere established himself quickly as one of Hollywood's leading men, and it's for good reason. He has a combination of charm and sex appeal, but also a depth and sensitivity that I believe Ed touched on that was incredibly unique to the time period that he came on, especially among other Hollywood sex symbols. He was not a rugged and tough romantic lead, which was popular amongst that time, but he was more of like a magnetic and sensual presence, which women clearly find irresistible, and men at that time clearly felt threatened by. Gere's strengths lie in his romantic appeal and his on-screen charisma with his female co-stars. I think culturally, he is a quintessential figure of the 80s and 90s when it comes to movies. He symbolized kind of like a masculinity that was a little more, I don't know, sophisticated than what people were used to. I do think Gere's fairly critiqued for his lack of risk-taking. I think he leans heavily into his natural charm and hasn't really pushed the boundaries, despite the fact that I do like some of his more serious roles, like Internal Affairs and Primal Fear. But whether it was by choice or by force due to his activism, he hasn't really taken a ton of different roles.
Yeah.
His activism has kind of occasionally overshadowed his career, but I respect that somewhat. I don't think he ranks highly among the most transformative actors of all time, but his body of work and pop culture impact is pretty enduring at this point. And I think it secures his position among Hollywood's kind of all-time great romantic leads. Again, combined with the fact that he clearly stands 10 toes down and says how he feels with his chest, regardless of what the repercussions are going to be, I respect that. I don't know if I would do the same, but I do respect someone that's willing to kind of jeopardize their career for something they believe in. So I added a few more points for that as well, and I gave Richard Gere 82.
Right, Aubrey.
I like Richard Gere.
Oh, no.
I do. I enjoy the stuff that I see him in. I think that he's charming. I think he's charismatic. I think that when it comes to doing those things and relying on those things, he can skate by well and do well in a movie. I just don't think he's a great actor. I don't see a ton of versatility. Rarely is he the person I walk away thinking about. He's not a scene stealer. I don't think he conveys great emotion. One of my least favorite scenes in Unfaithful is him at the apartment confronting Diane Lane's lover. I have a hard time, walking away being like, this guy is really great at acting. And so mine is very different. I think he's a great, movie star. I think he does great things. I respect him. I like him, but I'm going to give him a 68.
Ed, our guest Munson.
Yeah, it's a really interesting thought process, right? To try and go over an actor who I just avoided at all costs, and kind of coming back to him and seeing what he's done. I don't think it's fair just to say, like, he is a great romantic lead. His body of work is much bigger than that, and what he does and what he has been a part of, I think, gives him a little bit more credit or more roundedness to what he brings. I do kind of agree, like, his pop culture, cultural impact just in general as a leading man, what he did for rom-coms, and what he has done really well, deserves kind of like its kudos and its credit, but it's limited in what he provides. So I think partnering with a lot of his activism, what he's willing to put on the line, how he's done it, where he's put his money where his mouth is, I think that buoys it up a little bit, but I'd probably go like 75.
Case.
All right, boys, settle in.
More poems?
Got some more goodness for you.
More poems?
We'll see. I enjoyed this review of Gere and the walk down memory lane that it provided. A lot of the movies that we talked about, again, were in an era where I was running a movie theater. I got to watch every movie that came out, and I did, and it was fun. And I've seen a lot of the roles he's been in. Guy's been a true Hollywood force and leading man for decades. Career's been solid and steady. My only knock is that some of the roles he's in, I feel are very one note and predictable. However, like Chicago, I really enjoyed him just going for it all out. One of the things that I really enjoyed about this episode is breaking the stereotype that I at least had in my own mind that he was primarily a rom-com staple. And the fact is, I mean, most of his movies are not rom-coms. The bigger ones are, but not all of them. Even after all the time that we've spent preparing for this episode and talking about him, I mean, his pop culture status is still inexplicable to me. It's wild. It's wild that he's got it. I think the only way that I can accurately sum up my score and my review of him is to put it in prose. And I wrote another poem.
I knew it.
And it's titled Gere's Graceful Glow, a silver screen icon, a timeless sight. Gere's charm, a captivating light. From loverboy roles to king's might, his talent shines ever so bright. A versatile actor, a true delight, with each performance, pure delight. A leading man, a heartthrob's dream, his legacy, a cinematic gleam. Gere's career is of famed lore. For his Munson score, I give him an 84.
Oh my God.
Uh-huh.
How did you follow that up?
You're doing great.
Uh-huh.
Case.
A lot of poetry.
You might have a skill set I was unaware of.
All right, well, I'll round us out. So, a few things we didn't talk about with him. Did you guys know he turned down Bruce Willis's role in Die Hard?
Huh?
Were you aware of that?
No.
Yeah. Think about what that movie would be like if Richard Gere played that role instead of Bruce Willis.
Okay.
And while you're doing that, turn down the role of Gordon Gekko in Wall Street, played by Michael Douglas. Take a second to think about what Wall Street would be like if Richard Gere was in that role.
Two completely different movies entirely.
Yeah.
Those are like career-making movies.
I think he would work in Wall Street. I don't think he would work in Die Hard.
No.
Given some of the stuff he's played. So I just thought that was interesting. I was like, sometimes the story is what they don't take. So some of the things I liked outside of that, his talent for writing, playing music, his theater background, I really value a lot of that off the screen talent stuff that for me that creates like a more well-rounded performer. And you're not just a thespian, you do some other things. His pop culture impact, to your points, is really hard to judge because to anybody who is probably in their 30s or 40s, 100% they know who Richard Gere is. If you ask kids on TikTok today who Richard Gere is, not a single fucking one of them will know who Richard Gere is.
Yeah.
I don't know. Ed's give me that look. Maybe a few of them, but like he's just old.
Yeah.
Right. Like he's old. He hasn't done anything significant in a while that would pertain to younger audiences. So like judging his pop culture is hard because like Richard Gere is a staple of a name, 70s, 80s, and 90s, and even 2000s.
Yeah.
That one's hard to judge, right? And while his range isn't the most impressive, he was the guy for a particular type of film for a time, which says something. And while he's not a Swiss Army knife of an actor, you can't just throw him into character roles and he's not Philip Seymour Hoffman. You can't just throw him into something and the dude's just going to lean into it and go all out. That's just not what Richard Gere can do. But he does a few things really well. He's a legend in the dating game. Got to throw respect to that. Like, props to you. And I love that his work in the agency appears to like show that he still has it. He's still finding good work. He's still doing things that bring him some satisfaction. And ultimately, I respect the fact he's willing to speak his mind about politics and standing up for what he believes in, putting his money behind his productions, right? The fact that we just did Dennis Quaid is just such an interesting comparison for me because, like, politically,
Yeah,
I agree with a lot of what Richard Gere says, and I disagree so hard with a lot of Dennis Quaid's politics. But if I have to stand those two up next to each other of who I think is just a genuinely better actor, it's Quaid for me. And a lot of it is that subtle acting that Aubrey always likes to talk about. Can you convey emotion without saying a word? I think Dennis Quaid is better at that, and he has more flexibility and adaptability as an actor, whereas Richard Gere just does a couple things really, really well. So with that said, I'm going to give Richard Gere a 74, which is 2 points lower than Dennis Quaid. With that, that gives Richard Gere a 76.6, which puts him in 45th place.
Ooh,
right between Rami Malek and Angelica Houston.
we were so close.
So close to that box office score. We've been off for a couple episodes, kind of all over the place. So we're kind of back into that sweet spot.
Yeah, we're
That group of five there is Dennis Quaid, Rami Malek, Richard Gere, Angelica Houston, and Michael Sheen.
What an odd grouping.
oh yeah. On the box office rankings, he's just behind Keith David and just ahead of Tyler Perry.
Classic.
What an even odder grouping.
All right. Aubrey, what has he got coming?
This is kind of tricky to talk about. He's like back to work. He's got 3 things out in 2024, including The Agency, which we talked about, a movie called Longing with Diane Kruger, which hasn't been reviewed well, but it's a movie. And then probably the most exciting is Oh Canada, Paul Schrader film, which has made some of the rounds in the festival circuit and should be releasing wide soon. And it's being reviewed well.
Mm-hmm.
Back to Schrader, huh? 45 years later.
According to IMDb, he's the top billed, ahead of Uma Thurman and Jacob Elordi. That could be interesting. In terms of what comes after that, he's got one thing in development, which there's nothing attached to it, really. And then one thing in production, which is, it's interesting and kind of odd. So it's called The Making Of. And the premise is long married filmmakers have cast over-emotional actors to portray their younger selves in the story of their great love. Unfortunately, by the time shooting begins, their fabled marriage is unraveling, which is really compelling to me. The 4 actors attached to this are Blake Lively, Richard Gere, Lin-Manuel Miranda, and Diane Keaton.
Interesting.
One of those 4 is not like the others.
I don't really know how all 4 of those people fit together for something like this.
Yeah, for real.
3 of them interest me just from this could be interesting from an acting standpoint thing. And then Blake Lively, she's there.
No, for me, it's 3 of them I've enjoyed in movies, and one of them writes incredible Disney songs.
Richard Gere?
Yeah, right.
The writers of this are Marshall Hershkovitz and Edward Zwick, which is like...
Zwick?
Yeah, they're like a tandem. And their writing credits are American Assassin from 2017, which is an interesting movie that I kind of like.
Yeah.
And you have The Great Wall, the Matt Damon movie, Jack Reacher Never Go Back, Love and Other Drugs, The Last Samurai, have no idea what to make of this, but I'm so engaged in like the premise of this that I'm interested. So I'll probably keep my eye on that one.
I also rhymed earlier in case didn't acknowledge it, and I'm kind of upset about that. So next episode's hitting, first episode 2025 is hitting on January 9th. And we are bringing back Corey Wallace for her regularly scheduled appearance. And none other than Warren Hicks is coming back to make a holiday appearance.
Nice.
He's got some time off from school during the break, asked if he could join in. So we're going to double dip on this one, which means I don't have to do a review, which is very nice. So the wheel selected one of these 5 actors. Corey picked this actor, and Warren is just tagging in. So keep that in mind. So you got Amy Smart, Greta Gerwig, Kristen Wiig, Kathleen Quinlan, and Damian Bashir. Love, hate. What are your thoughts?
It's Greta Gerwig, right?
I don't know what to make of this grouping of 5 people. Some of it's exciting. Some of it's, I don't know. Kristen Wiig is a super interesting actor.
Yeah.
So that would be a lot of fun. I feel like Amy Smart brings about a lot of bad movies.
Corey did Natasha Lyonne, Aubrey Plaza, Dakota Johnson, and Lucy Liu. Those are her previous 4.
Which to me sets up for Kristen Wiig. That feels like the natural addition to this. Greta Gerwig would be interesting just because she doesn't have a ton of acting credits.
No, directing.
Yeah.
She's only got a few of those too. So it's like, This would be the case episode. He'd watch like 11 movies and then he'd be in there.
The Chris Tucker episode right there. I don't know a ton about Kathleen Quinlan. I mean, I remember her from Apollo 13. That's like the main role I remember her in is Marilyn Lovell. But I see she's in The Doors and a Civil Action Breakdown with Kurt Russell. But I don't know anything about her.
Horizon Part 1, The American Saga Part 1.
All right, here we go. I finally get a reason to watch that. There we go. I love Kristen Wiig. I think she's got sneaky good range. That would be my vote. But I think Greta Gerwig is going to be who Corey picked, because for some reason I thought Corey Wallace talked about Francis Ha.
Was it out in the Adam Driver episode? Because he's in that.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Amy Smart would be fun just so you could watch movies like Road Trip.
Crank.
2000s dumb comedies.
Yeah.
A lot less intelligent comedies than some of the Kristen Wiig stuff you would watch, which is a little bit smarter. And well, actually, I don't know if that's true. Ed, if you had to pick one of these 5, who would you pick?
If I had to pick, I'd probably go Greta Gerwig. I'm more interested in kind of what she's done and what she's doing. I think Kristen Wiig would be a lot of fun. I think it's a very approachable actor, but I don't know. Greta seems very fascinating, just overall.
All right, final guesses on who Corey would have picked.
I think it's Kristen Wiig.
Kyle, since you haven't brought up Demi and Beecher or whatever,
Bashir?
that's who I think it is.
Okay.
Because normally you pepper in like, oh, by the way, don't forget about so-and-so. So I think that's who it is now, because you have not chimed in.
Maybe. He's a Hateful Eight.
Yeah.
I'm on Greta Gerwig here.
Okay. Aubrey?
I think it's Kristen Wiig.
Okay. All right. So we got 3 different votes there. All right. Well, I don't decide. Corey doesn't decide. Maybe Warren decides.
No?
No, Warren doesn't decide. Ed doesn't decide either. The wheel decides, and we'll see what happens. Ed, you're a champ. You came in at the last minute to talk about an actor that you certainly didn't pick, and it sounds like you didn't particularly enjoy, but I think you crushed it, man. We're so glad to have you. Your red carpet moment, right? You can drop any plugs of stuff you're working on or wise words for our audience. Floor is yours.
I really don't have anything going on. I'm not that kind of person. I'm just some dude with questionable opinions talking about films. But 2 things that I'll leave with, kind of recommendations, especially given a couple of things. A, the conversations today, Richard Gere's activism, particularly with AIDS, and the band Played On, and kind of just the political climate we find ourselves in. So the first thing that I'll plug here is a fantastic book. It is written by Sarah Schulman. It is called Let the Record Show. It is a in-depth interview of the ACT UP and AIDS activism in New York, kind of going over how they were so successful. They took on the FDA, the NIH, they created needle exchange programs, they took over Grand Central, they changed the legal definition of AIDS to include women, they transformed the American insurance industry, weaponized art, advertising to push their agenda, and battled and beat the New York Times, the Catholic Church, and the pharmaceutical industry.
Dang.
And a large part of it was decentralized protest movements. So it was a common goal, raise awareness, but how you did that didn't matter. Go do what you want to do, and if people support it, you all go do your thing. Not only does it inform kind of what was happening during the AIDS movement in the 80s, but kind of gives a roadmap of how to be an activist even in today's climate. So if that's something you're interested in and passionate about, I highly recommend this book, just to kind of give light to the plight and fight around AIDS, especially in the 80s.
Sounds fascinating.
Yeah, it's a really good book overall. The second thing I'd like to leave on, and it's very, very timely. In the 80s, the Names Project was founded, which was a quilt that was put together for people that were diagnosed with AIDS that were likely not to survive it.
Mm-hmm.
And this was a way of leaving something behind that people could see. One of the most, I would say, moving panels of this was created by a man named Dwayne Puryear. So I'll read it. So his panel says, "My name is Dwayne Kearns Puryear. I was born on December 20th, 1964. I was diagnosed with AIDS on September 7th, 1987 at 4:45 p.m. I was 22 years old. Sometimes it makes me very sad. I made this panel myself. If you are reading it, I am dead." And that's it. So his birthday is coming up, especially when this episode drops. So happy birthday, Dwayne. You should still be here, but unfortunately you're not. Those are my 2 plugs.
I appreciate you sharing, man.
Yeah, man.
Much appreciated.
Fun having you on. I loved your insight and some of the angles that you shined a light on. That was really great having you.
Appreciate it.
I also know that quilt that's like world famous, right?
Oh yeah.
That is.
It's
Okay, that's what I thought.
It's an art piece, an installation.
As we wrap things up, you can always find us on Instagram, Munsons at Movies. You can email us, munsonsatthemovies@gmail.com. Any final thoughts from Richard Gere?
I ain't gonna quit! Don't you do it! Don't you! I got nowhere else to go!
Munsons Out.
All right, let's go. Thank you for the education, gentlemen. We've just received a PhD in stupidity. Doctor, shall we?
You know, I went on a spree in '83, skiing in Switzerland, a little golf in Scotland, sailing and fishing off the coast of Mexico, swimming in Hawaii, and on my way to that city by the bay with its restaurants and ambiance, San Francisco, I decided to stop over in Duluth to catch my breath. But you know what? It took my breath away. I could have saved myself a lot of travel, and you know why? Because it's all right here. Duluth. Who loves you, baby? I do.